So I've been here in California for a month, and yes, I'm wearing my North Face jacket because it is not warm or hot in California in January, February. And I've been, as you can see, where am I? Vineyard. I've been noticing a lot of vineyards. I am not in Napa Valley. I'm in the San Luis Obispo area. Paso Robles, for example, has a lot of wineries that have sprung up in the last decade. And I have some thoughts about the way people are running vineyards and how the land has changed and the impact on ecosystems. And I have some questions. So I'd like to share those with you. And also we're going to talk to a couple of vineyard owners about maybe there's a better way to do wineries than we're currently thinking. Let's explore.
For that, and I can't be organic for that reason, but I can work to make things better for the environment.
And like these they'll be blended.
The cover crop was above my head.
Wow. Let's begin our journey into better vineyards here at Tablas Creek Winery in Paso Robles, California. Tablas Creek has organic, biodynamic, and regenerative certifications. They have a sister vineyard in France, but here they bottle 500,000 bottles of wine a year. No pesticides, no herbicides, no chemicals on the land, soil, plants, grapes, or during harvest or processing. Just 100% natural. But let's get into what else they're doing that makes them really special. This is Austin Collins. His dad is the head winemaker here at Tablas Creek, but he grew up here and is gradually taking over his dad's role, among others. But as you look around the extensive vineyards at Tablas Creek, let's take a look at what makes a vineyard a regenerative farm. What does that mean exactly? So here are some of the elements of a regenerative vineyard, and don't worry, we're going to explain each of these as we go through the video. Compost. Biochar, water catchment and swales, owl nesting boxes, plant habitats for beneficial insects, using on-site materials, reeds, straw, rocks, gray water, cover crops planted in between the vines, and animal fertilizer from grazing sheep.
We got the Regenerative organic certification in 2019.
Here are some other important elements of Tablas Creek Regenerative Vineyard. Dry farming vines, vegetable garden for staff, fruit trees. The grass-fed lamb from the grazing animals is sold to restaurants and also on-site. Their honey is also sold on-site. And the olive trees produce olive oil that is also sold on-site. I'm going to show you each of these elements and tell you a little bit about it so you can see the incredible synergy of the way all of these elements fit together and produce a supportive, sustainable, regenerative, super healthy ecosystem for every living being on this land. From the microbes in the soil to the mycorrhizal network, to the roots and trunks and leaves of the plants. It's just this interconnected web of support and regeneration that is so wonderful to see when you contrast it to the devastated ecosystems of what's essentially vineyard monocrops and vineyard factory farms, which is what most of the industry is doing. So I'm hoping this video is really going to give you a great vision, but also some practical how-tos on how to start transitioning to this more regenerative ecosystem if you're a vineyard owner, or you're thinking about becoming one, or even if you have a friend who's one, or you buy from one. Maybe you're the member of a wine club. This would be a video that you could send to your vineyard owner to say, hey, we want you to move towards this. We want to see more of this. And this is the kind of wine we want to be drinking. So I hope that video does it for you. I'm also going to get into exactly the same principles with a very small beginner winemaker who only bottles 1,500 bottles a year on 10 acres. He's brand new. He's only been farming 3 years, but I'm going to show you the incredible regenerative principles that he's put into place in only 3 years. I hope it inspires you as much as it inspired me.
Now, in the end, I've kind of moved away from sustainability and moved towards, regenerative farming, because with regenerative farming, I believe you give more to the environment than you use in your farming. And if you look at the baseline of this property, my objective was to give back way more to the environment than what this property had been using, and you'll see how that plays out. The soil had previously been completely bare on the property. For 4 years in a row now, I've planted seeds, because this is what the property looked like without any kind of cover crop and stuff like that. This is what it normally would look like by the end of February. This is what it looked like the past 2 years in April. We did have a lot of rain the past 2 years, but generally we would have enough to get from here to here. It actually got the 4 foot high. This is probably still only March. It actually got the 4 foot high in April and May the past 2 years. And you normally need about 1 to 2 inches of rain to sustain a cover crop. So when you arrived here, we were at like a ½ inch of rain year to date. Now that you've been here, I think we're at 1 to 2. And this week, hopefully, knock on metal, we're supposed to get 1 to 2 inches of rain just on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Because we're from Vancouver and we bring rain wherever we go. Cover crops are grown in vineyards to improve soil health, suppress weeds, and prevent erosion. So whether you're just starting out like Frank here, or you've got plenty of water and thriving cover crops like Tablas Creek, cover crops are an essential feature of a healthy soil system and vineyard. They also help with pest management and increase biodiversity. In addition, cover crops help cycle nutrients through the soil and vines. They fix nitrogen into the soil and increase soil organic carbon. After harvest and before the first rains, Tablas Creek will do a light disking, just the surface, and then plant their cover crop. About 40% of their vines are dry farmed with cover crops. The plants included in a vineyard's cover crop are selected based on the growing conditions, but they'll include legumes like clover, winter peas, vetch, or bell beans, grasses like barley, oats, rye, buckwheat, and brassicas like mustard, turnips, and daikon radish.
The owl boxes are a big piece of attracting owls, which helps take care of the gophers and ground squirrels that can be a big problem here. We can't use conventional methods, i.e. we can't poison, which is what most people do. So we let the owls do the dirty work for us.
Tablas Creek doesn't even know how many owl boxes they have because they just keep adding more as they see that they need them. What Austin is showing us here is how the area at the base of every owl box is covered with a very dense, rich foliage, and that is not just from the owl feces, but they spit out the remains of the rodents, the bones, the skin, and that also helps to fertilize and build a better soil.
You go down into the valley down there?
Yeah.
I have a fence pole, a large, you see those?
Yeah, those are nice and high.
So but I can go, that's 7 foot, but then I can easily put a pole inside of there and go higher.
Yeah, you can put a 2-foot pole with an owl box on top. That'll put you at about,
So the question is whether I should just skip that and go for, so like I could put, I have those U's kind of there at the back and down in the valley. But I thought this would be a good place for one, too.
So here's the gig. Like, I totally agree with you on those ones. But your owls, they normally are here or here.
Okay.
That's where, but that's because you've got really good sized trees here.
Right.
Right? So I would still put one up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will probably put the first one here. I'll see if I can extend it. I'm going to cut some of those branches back. I have to anyway because it's blocking the solar. So
Yeah.
I'll see if I can go a little bit up above that. I'll see what's on top there. But then I'm going to put one down there because there's a lot of,
Yeah.
you know, there's coyote bush and stuff down there adjacent to the property. So that'll probably be my second. And then the third one I'll put back up against those oaks and stuff in the back, on the back left corner of the vineyard.
Yeah. So you've got a whole bunch of lavender here. Vineyards cultivate beneficial insects to combat the pest insects. You don't need to use chemical pesticides if you get the balance right for soil health, robust vines, and enough beneficial insects to help out. A single ladybird can consume 5,000 aphids in its lifetime. They aren't fussy eaters and will consume many of the most damaging pests in agriculture. In Germany, researchers found that the total number of flying insects, such as ladybirds and wasps, fell by around 80% between 1990 and 2017. Exposure to pesticides is thought to be the cause. For birds, this fall in insect numbers was disastrous. Across Europe, the bird population has fallen by more than 500 million over the last 40 years. This is how an ecosystem works and why it's so important for us humans to use organic, biodynamic, permaculture, and regenerative practices rather than chemical poisons. Insect activity contributes to the building of the soil's organic matter. Some insects are pollinators, others are herbivores that regulate weed populations by eating weed seeds. Through their manure and urine, grazing sheep or goats spread nutrients from eating the cover crops back onto the soil surface. The insects, like dung beetles, then move these nutrients back into the soil system. We're going to talk about the grazing animals a little bit later.
So I'm looking at the beneficial insect plants as well. Okay?
Yes.
And so wild roses, California lilac. I'm going to just put some. I've got lavender all around the place.
Yeah.
So I think as of today, I'm going to buy, you know, like 9 different plants, and I'm going to start creating a beneficial insect bed on both sides of that jutting out fence down there, and I'm going to put some over on this side too.
Yeah.
And so those are all on the plants. But I mean, I just don't have. I'm one person. I don't have tons of. I mean, I have to wait till I make some money to, you know, just from rental or whatever, so I can invest back.
Well, and that's, I think, what's inspiring about your story, right? Like, yeah, you're just one guy, but look how much you've done.
Well, thank you.
Because you've just kept going. You're like, okay, this year I can do that, and then this year, and then over time, you're like, wow, you're almost at full regenerative vineyard here.
Yeah.
Like, it's congratulations.
Well,
That's very inspirational.
I appreciate that. I can't be organic, but
Yet.
But I'm working to get rid of that.
Yeah.
I mean, and so why am I putting in beneficial insect beds so I can get rid of it? And that's what the regenerative means. Are you working practices that take you away from things that hurt the environment or from using chemicals that you don't want to use? That's what that's their definition now, is that you're working practices that will take you there, not that you're there right now.
Amen.
We've been certified organic for many years. We certified for biodynamic farming about 10 or 12 years ago, and then recently certified, we're the first winery to be certified with the new regenerative organic certification.
I've been driving around here the last month. I've been kind of horrified at the industrial farming of vineyards. Like, what's the difference between this and monocrop agriculture? It's so I was like, does anybody have any idea, any concept of an ecosystem in this business? And that's when I found Tablas Creek, who's, you know, obviously one of the biggest ones. And then, funnily enough, I'm renting your Airbnb.
Well, that's what I mean. So this fall, when we did, again, the family comes out every October, and we went to Tablas Creek, and then we went to a couple others. It was Law, I think, and Law was big on dry farming. And so but each of those visits, you know, when you tell them your industry, tell you more than they might tell you if you're just visiting, especially then the questions I'm asking. How do you dry farm? How do you put water down at all when you dry farm?
Yeah.
How do you know how much to put down? So I'm asking them all those questions, and they're, you know, as long as the person is knowledgeable to be able to tell me, they do, you know, and I learned from that too. So I'm learning in multiple different ways.
So you're finding this industry is more supportive than rather competitive in sequestering information. They're sharing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm finding that at least the ones I'm going to are finding it as a selling point to really work the soil health and do things for the environment. But these are smaller places, and my daughter helps me pick out the ones that she knows will be interesting to us. So
Yeah.
they're not necessarily the big ones. A lot of the regenerative farming involves healthy soil. I start with a vermicompost. The vermicompost is a worm casing material. There are worms in it. It's a very rich compost. It's pretty expensive, but you use a cup in every hole. So I dig a 12-inch deep hole, put a cup of vermicompost in it. That inoculates the soil with microbes.
So do you purchase that vermicompost?
Yes, I purchased that, yes.
From
Black Diamond Vermicompost.
Okay.
It's a woman that I met very early on. When I first got here, I found her, and she formed this company in Paso Robles, and she's a real fanatic. She came from LA, but she's a real fanatic about what the worms do. And they sell it for gardening, and she's actually in a test with NASA right now for using her vermicompost in some space tests.
Wow.
For like growing stuff on Mars or whatever. So.
Vermicompost contains worm castings, which is worm poop, decomposed bedding, and lots of worms and tiny organisms, both dead and alive. It is a valuable nutrient-rich fertilizer, soil conditioner, and microbiome booster. If you already have grazing animals on site, you can make your own vermicompost using their manure. See my video on the super easy way to do this using horse manure.
So I start with the vermicompost, and then behind that you bring and you cover it with soil. You hit it with compost tea every 3 to 4 months, which is a tea blend from that vermicompost. It nourishes the microbes, and then this biofit, it's like a seaweed, other kind of mixture that nourishes the microbes. So all that is on a more frequent basis, trying to get those microbes healthy and growing in that soil.
Do you get the compost tea from Black Diamond as
Yes.
well? And then how about the biofit?
Biofit comes from the buttonwillow, but buttonwillow where I get other organic fertilizers and stuff. I'm pretty much all organic except for the fungicide that I have to apply with the sulfur for the powdery mildew.
The powdery mildew.
Yeah. Then once a year, I put down compost, 6 to 8 tons per acre, right down the vine rows, and then we plant the cover crop. So that happens in late November, early December.
So you put that compost in between the vines?
8 tons per acre, but right down the rows, so they're right on the roots of the vines. And then the final thing I do after the vines are in for a year or so is put down a mycorrhiza fungus, which is a fungus that attaches to the roots and grows and extends they become a tentacle for the roots. They extend the roots deeper into the soil. Again, pulling the water to the vines.
And your compost is combined of what, you've got some dead standing trees that you fell and you cut up?
Yes.
Everything here is from the vineyard. It's a closed loop system, and they don't bring anything from off the farm to here. And that's a big part of regenerative farming. So their compost is made up of leaves. They have old growth trees here, plus 250 fruit trees that they planted. A lot of the carbon is from the prunings. All those piles are from vines that have been pruned. They also put wood chips in. Sometimes they put bigger pieces in to try and aerate it a bit more. Sometimes they grow stuff on top of the compost piles. On top of the compost piles? Wow!
Use it as a raised bed, essentially.
Right.
And we also have, on the other side, which doesn't look any different, it's called a culture pile.
Uh-huh.
It looks a lot like a compost pile, but within it are larger pieces of wood to smaller pieces of wood, so the inside is just like this carbon-rich system that you pile compost on top, and then we use that as a raised bed as well.
and I still don't quite understand how it's made. The wind is too strong here again, so I'm going to tell you what Austin is saying. Making biochar is a tribal technique that dates back to Amazonian tribes using it to regenerate the forest. Here at Tablas Creek, they burn wood to make the biochar charcoal, but the burning is done in a kiln to keep the temperature super hot, 500 degrees with no oxygen, in a process known as pyrolysis. So when you make biochar, there's no smoke. And then they put the fire out by pouring water on it, and when it's cool, they drain the tank. What you're left with is pure charcoal, biochar, which they then mix into their compost pile. The purpose is to have a slow release of nutrients, and it also acts to retain water in the soil and sequester carbon. If you see ash when you're burning it, you've gone too far, so you add more wood on top. It should look like this. See how you can still see the grain in the wood? They say that when you rub it on yourself, it should wipe off easily. So you put down the first layer of wood. Temperature should be 500 degrees. When you see a layer of ash begin to form on top, then you add another layer of wood. And you keep going, adding and layering like that until the tank is full. Then you pour water on top when it's done to stop the process. The next day, you drain the water out. See the drainage pipe down at the bottom? This was an old wine tank that they cut to make this biochar kiln. Very ingenious. Swales are used to catch rainwater, slow it down, and flow it throughout the land. They can also funnel rainwater to areas that require water or into catchment ponds. Tablas Creek Vineyard has planted olive trees along its swales because olive trees need more water than grapevines. They then create olive oil from the fruit, which they sell in their store. This is an overflow catchment for the main catchment pond, located just below their compost pile. Then after the main catchment pond, they have this area inside the fencing where they grow vegetables for the staff, because vegetables require quite a lot of water. This second catchment pond across the road helps prevent the water from flowing downhill off towards the ocean. So they try to keep as much water on the property to recharge the groundwater and sink down into the aquifers. The other thing you may have noticed about Tablas Creek is the large number of native trees they have on the property, in addition to the 250 fruit trees they planted. Trees also help sequester water by storing it in their roots and trunk and then sharing it during times of drought. Their roots can also access the deeper groundwater storage and aquifers. We know from the work of Dr. Suzanne Simard and books like The Hidden Life of Trees that trees send water out to their family members during times of need, but they also send water to other tree species as well to support their larger ecosystem. In this way, trees help spread water around the land. During the winter season, all the cold air flows down these valleys and hillsides to the lowest point, and it will just sit there. So these giant fans are used to blow the warm air from above down to mix with the cooler air around the vines, thus preventing frost damage. The fans raise up 25 feet in the air and oscillate 360 degrees. Tablas Creek has a few of these fans placed around the vineyard in low spots to help prevent frost damage to the vines. Here's another cool thing. Tablas Creek places straw and reeds along their farm roads to prevent erosion from rainwater. Here's one of the stretches of road that did not have any straw or reeds placed on it. You can see the damage to the road. The straw and reeds come from vegetation grown on the farm. Here's another resource that's harvested directly from the vineyard. All these beautiful rocks used to create swales, retaining walls, and decorative structures.
As I looked around the property, I saw a lot of splotches of green in a desert. What that was telling me is that I had leaks all over the property, usually at the main control valve locations and also at the filter pad and well tank is where I would see that exist. So the first thing I did was take $60,000 and completely replace the pump and pad and each of these valve stations that feed water out into blocks of grapes. I then took advantage of that to tie it into the cloud and to put soil sensors in the ground so that I would know what level of moisture I had at what depth in the soil. And I'm going to show you what I see every day in the property. And what you're seeing here is a couple things that happen. It's been a very dry year. So this is 4 inches deep, 8 inches deep, 12, 16, 20, all the way up to 40 inches deep. As you can see, there's a lot of moisture at the deep levels, which is great because you want your roots to go down into that deeper level to get the water. But it's been a very dry year, and this is just showing moisture levels dropping throughout the year. Well, two things happened, and this was the week before you came. I put 2 gallons of water per plant down just to try to get some nourishment of water into the vines in that dry period. And you can see the impact that it had at 4 and 8 inches of depth. But here's the rain. So in the past 2 weeks now, we've started to have rain, and you're starting to see each of the levels kick up. But I can use this then during the season, which is then very dry, to determine how much I water and at what frequency I water. And the objective is to get my roots penetrating into the soil at the 20 to 40 inch depths where there's water. And that's how you can then do dry farming. If your root depth is significant and you have moisture levels at those depths, you can avoid putting down more irrigation.
40% of the vines at Tablas Creek Vineyard are dry farmed. When the vines are first planted, they're irrigated for 2 years and then left to fend for themselves. Of course, they are also supported by cover crops between the rows, compost, biochar, sheep grazing and manure, and a strong mycorrhizal network. Notice how they are also given much more space between the vines, and they are not forced to grow in the traditional box shape.
The other thing that I did in constructing the house was to put in place an underground cistern. I have a 1,500 gallon underground cistern that I capture the water from the roof gutters. I've asked for a grant for another 10,000 gallon tank because this is not enough. This is about 2 inches of rain coming off the gutters. And so if I can get another 10,000 gallon tank, I'll be able to water all the ornamental plants around the house for the whole season with that water system. How do you then take that work that I'm doing to try to make better wine? Starting from mid-April, when you get your buds breaking, through to when you harvest, usually between the end of September and the middle of October. But the first half of that, 80 to 90 days, when the berries are forming in green, and you go bud, break, flower, and green berries, you want to keep the water on the vines that they need to be fully nourished. Then once the grapes change colors and start to ripen, in Grazing it's called, you cut the water back and you deficit irrigate. And you do that because your sugar's developing, and then you're trying to develop your anthocyanin and concentrate flavor compounds in the grapes. They're called phenols. I think so, phenolic compounds. And so taking the water off and deficit irrigating helps to concentrate those and produce a better wine. And so all along this journey, I'm using those moisture soil sensors to tell me how much water I have and am I giving enough. And then I also calculate, based on the temperatures and humidity every day, how much water is evaporating. And then I also have I have an app that I can take a picture of the leaves and know how much water stress is in the plant. It might not seem like it's that technical, but you don't just dump water in the soil. You really kind of manage this process, both for the health of the vines and the quality of the wine.
Sheep manure is a natural fertilizer rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are crucial for plant growth. By grazing weeds and leaving manure behind, sheep can reduce the need for tillage, which can damage the soil structure and release carbon. Their urine, feces, and grazing stimulates microbial activity in the soil, which is essential for nutrient cycling and plant health. Through their manure, sheep can contribute up to 35% of soil organic matter. This provides vital nutrients to cover crops and vines and supports soil organisms that keep the soil healthy. Sheep can help to manage blackgrass and other weeds by eating them and turning them into soil nutrients and fertilizer. Sheep or goat hooves won't damage or compact the soil like cows might, and they breed rapidly, providing a steady supply of grass-fed lamb to sell in your wine shop or through direct order. I'm a strong advocate for on-farm, one-shot slaughter that the animal doesn't even see coming. This is the most humane, non-stress way I know of to kill a meat animal, rather than loading it onto a terrifying trailer, separating it from its herd, and driving it at high speeds to a loud, uncaring slaughterhouse where hundreds of animals are crying and super stressed because they know what's coming. We can do better. The sheep here at Tablas Creek are in a grazing field right now due to heavy rains. As soon as things dry out a bit, they'll go back out on the vineyard and graze in rotational blocks, where they're moved regularly to prevent overgrazing. An excellent book on the benefits of grazing animals and the soil microbiome is Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown. An excellent book with lots of stories, really easy to read.
So what are the results that I have so far? Well, when I came here, there was about 30% of the slots that didn't have a vine in them. Today, I have a healthy vine in every slot. Second is I now have greater flexibility. I'm just beginning to get fruit. So I'm in my 400 vines. I'm going to be in my third year of fruit. 2,000 vines. I'm going to be in my second year of fruit. And then I'm finishing a final planting of 1,000 vines that won't give me fruit to 2026. But every vine that I've planted, every slot that I've had, I've lost a few due to gophers and rodents. I had a little nursery that I replaced them with, and they're all healthy. Then I also have greater flexibility for wine style and quality, because with the virus that was in the vines before, I wasn't getting the sugar and wasn't able to get as much body, the alcohol was fine, but I wasn't able to get as much body in the wine because the skins were also thinner. So now I have greater flexibility for wine style and quality, and that's kind of illustrated by this picture. These are the wines that I have here right now, and you can see how light these are. I'm bottling my wines this Wednesday. This is my Tempranillo, and this is my Cabernet Franc. After 3 years of, the Cabernet Franc are new vines, and this was after 2 to 3 years of the soil work. I was able to get a deeper body, richer wine out of those vines. And then I feel like we are giving, between the solar, the significant reduction in water, the cover crop, the conversion of carbon dioxide to oxygen, we're now giving more to the environment than we used before.
The wine just seems to have a spark when it's grown the way we grow it, with little water as we can use. We dry farm or farm without irrigation as much as possible, which forces the roots deep, which gives you more of a character of place.
When I think about just the difference with organically grown vegetables,
yeah,
right, and fruit, like the flavor profile. Like, let's take an organic vine-ripened tomato,
right,
versus a conventional tomato. Like, you can't even compare the taste.
You can't compare the taste.
Like, one has zero taste compared to the other one, which is rich and layered and multidimensional.
Right. Absolutely, and definitely that translates to the wine. Absolutely.
And I have had the help of the government on this. I've had 3 years of compost and cover crop grants. I had to put down a certain amount of compost, the 8 tons per acre, and I had to prove that I did the cover cropping, and they gave me about 50% of the money to help. The replant, because my vines had this disease, the state of California is trying to get rid of that disease, so they also helped me about 40 cents on the dollar to replant the vines and do it the right way. But if it wasn't for the education I got from UC Davis, the previous owner was teaching me to do it the way he did it. And when I went through that educational process, I just realized how wrong he was doing things.
And how did you find the grants?
The grant?
Yeah.
People told me they were out there, and I just started looking them up. And again, I'm in an application process right now. I want another soil sensor. When I put in my new irrigation for the last 1,000 vines I'm planting, they have a pressure-sensitive drip line that right now, with the drip lines I have, a couple emitters may be putting out 0.6 gallons an hour, and a couple might be putting out 0.3 gallons per hour, but in total you might be putting out too much water. This pressure-sensitive drip line really manages to the pressure that you're feeding the water to just put the exact amount of water down. So for my last 1,000 vines, I'm hoping to get some help on that from the government. And then again, I've asked for this tank to recapture more water from the roof.
Really old wineries that you might see up in Napa will have similar large vessels. I mean, so I don't think we're the only one, but it's pretty unusual. Yeah.
Did you get a hold of those because of your sister company in France?
Yeah. I mean, basically in the beginning we just mimicked what they did. We did everything just the same, and that was a piece of that. But the thinking behind a big barrel like that is you have some wood character, but it's a lot less than you would have with the equivalent of wine in smaller barrels because there's less surface area.
That makes sense.
Right? So we don't want a heavy oak imprint. We don't want any over oak flavors. We want it to be an integrated part of the wine, and that helps us achieve that.
This is, I think, the most important part. It's checking the wine every couple months. And right now I'm bottling 5 barrels of wine this week. I've checked them every 2 months with the help of a consulting winemaker that runs the place where I make the wines. And, if we need to make any adjustments, we do. But what's interesting to me is those 3 barrels of Cabernet Franc, just because of the different makeup of the barrels, 2 of them ended up being, we think, better than the third, and which just amazes me. So but what that gives me the ability to do is we're going to blend half of the 2 better barrels together, and we're calling that a family reserve Cabernet Franc. And then we're taking the remaining 2 halves and mixing it with the 3rd barrel that we don't think is quite as good, and making then a basic Cabernet Franc. But in general, my consulting winemaker, says she thinks that definitely the top line one is an award-winning wine this year for us. But just being able to do it on such a small scale and manage it that way for quality is pretty fun.
And were those 3 barrels made of the same material?
Yes, same. That's what I mean. That's what's amazing. It was the 400 vines that are over here on the backside, on the front side of the property. 400 vines, 3 barrels of wine, and yet the same, fermented the same, but because of what they were in. One was actually a recoupe barrel. 2 other ones were original French oak. And the recoupe wasn't quite as good, which is supposed to be as good because they just refinish it, but it wasn't as good as the other 2.
Interesting. And these are what your barrels look like.
Yes. This is actually the recoupe barrel that I brought back. Those are 2 new French oak barrels that I just bought. They'll be for next year's wine production. But I have 9 barrels at the winery are my current inventory that I'm using.
Do these come from France?
Yes, these are.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what they do is they make the wood. They get the wood from France and they condition. So it's called Seguin Moreau is the company.
Okay.
They age, season the oak, but then they send it to the United States, and they have craftsmen who make them here, and that just makes it less expensive and dollar based instead of fluctuating based on the currency. If I brought this in completely from France, so
Yeah, fair.
So that's what that is.
And what's your ballpark cost on a barrel like that?
for about $1,200 to $1,300 a
Each.
barrel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I would expect.
And it's 59 gallons, which I want to say is probably 150 bottles. So you're talking $1,300 against 150 bottles. So there's a lot of price coming from French oak, and there's a lot of work to. Can you do some other things? Like, can you use staves? Which I find, I did do one test with some staves, which are, just the wood pieces in an existing neutral barrel, they call it. And does that give you the same oak flavor that an oak barrel does? And then that would have less of an environmental impact as well. You wouldn't have to, you wouldn't have to be using as much of a tree to make that wine. And so I am trying, and that's less expensive too, so I'm trying those options. Fourth pillar is replanting the vines. What's important with the vine replant, the previous owner had taken cuttings from a friend and put them in pots and propagated roots in the Zinfandel, for example, and put it right in the soil. That is not the way you should be planting vines. We learned many years ago with the French collapse of the wine industry that it's best if you use a rootstock that is favorable to your soil, and most rootstocks come from the United States. So I picked the rootstock. Generally it was 1103P. It's drought resistant. It likes a basic kind of soil. It's resistant to certain nematodes or bugs that are in the soil. And then on top of that, you put the French varietal, which is then Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. So you graft that at the nursery. So these vines are then designed for this soil and will be healthier and will end up requiring less water as they develop.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our exploration and inquiry into wineries and vineyards and how, as responsible humans on this gorgeous planet, we can all try to do things a little bit better. And that works out well, not only for ourselves and our profit margin and the product that we're producing and the product that people are consuming, it also works out better for this entire amazing ecosystem, land, soil, mycorrhizas, soil organisms, animals, birds, everything.